Tonight began with a statement that didn't arrive with warning, but landed like a political shockwave, not in months, not in weeks, but in a single announcement that instantly shifted the conversation around the future of Social Security for nearly 70 million Americans. Within hours, Washington wasn't debating anymore, it was reacting. Financial offices scrambled, policy desks lit up, and across the country, retirees paused mid-scroll, trying to understand what they had just heard. Because tonight, something changed in how Social Security is being discussed at the highest level of American power. And once that line was crossed, the response came immediately. For months, there were quiet signals inside Washington. Not public speeches, not official drafts, but patterns. Sudden scheduling changes inside federal briefing calendars. Unusual gaps in Treasury SSA coordination updates. Closed-door meetings that weren't being explained. And a familiar silence that seasoned analysts recognize instantly. When Washington goes quiet on Social Security, something is coming. And tonight, it did. Early today, that silence broke in a way few expected. A shift in language, subtle but politically loaded, appeared in the administration's messaging around Social Security and long-term fiscal planning. Not a full policy rollout, not a bill, but something far more dangerous in Washington terms, a test of reaction. And it included a phrase that detonated instantly across policy circles, that changes to benefits or eligibility structures were on the table. 3 words, but in Washington, those 3 words don't float. They land. By the time the statement became public, the reaction had already begun. And it wasn't slow, it wasn't measured, it was immediate. Within hours, emergency calls were underway among senior Democratic leadership. Advocacy groups issued alerts. Policy teams began drafting responses before official clarifications even arrived. The message from opponents was unified. This was not a routine discussion. This was a line being tested. One of the first coordinated responses came from major senior advocacy organizations representing tens of millions of Americans. Their warning was simple: clarify this immediately. Because ambiguity in Social Security policy is never neutral. It becomes momentum. And momentum, once it builds in Washington, becomes policy. Inside Congress, the reaction escalated further. Leadership-level emergency calls were convened, not scheduled, not routine, but rapid response coordination sessions. Lawmakers weren't debating wording anymore. They were preparing positioning because they recognized what was happening. A framing battle over Social Security had begun, and framing is everything, because once policy language becomes normalized in public discourse, it becomes easier to legislate. That's what made today different. Not the statement itself, but the speed at which it moved through the political system. By afternoon, the response machine was fully active. Advocacy groups pushed coordinated messaging. Lawmakers moved to Sunday shows and digital platforms. Political networks began targeting key districts with retiree-heavy populations. Not randomly, strategically, because everyone understood the same thing. If this narrative stabilizes, it becomes real. Behind the scenes, analysts began describing what was happening in more technical terms. A testing phase, a policy stress signal, an attempt to measure public tolerance for entitlement restructuring language. But the opposition didn't wait for confirmation. They responded as if the test had already passed. And they rejected it. What makes tonight significant is not just the administration's language. It's what it touched. Social Security is not treated like normal policy in American politics. It is treated like a guarantee. And when that guarantee is questioned, even indirectly, the reaction is immediate and total. By evening, the political response had fully consolidated. Statements from senior Democratic leaders were direct and forceful. Social Security is not negotiable. It is not a bargaining chip. It is a commitment. And that framing spread instantly across media ecosystems. Meanwhile, financial advisors and retirement planners reported a surge in concern, not panic, uncertainty. And in policy markets, uncertainty is the first reaction before pressure. What intensified the situation further was that this wasn't an isolated message. Alongside Social Security language, references to broader entitlement restructuring, including Medicare and Medicaid budget discussions, began circulating through policy channels. Individually, they are policy ideas. Together, they form something larger, a structural conversation about the future of America's safety net. And that is where the political tension sharpens, because every administration eventually faces the same contradiction: the need to reduce long-term deficits versus the political reality of programs millions depend on every month. Tonight, that contradiction is no longer theoretical. It is active. Inside Washington, analysts now believe this moment may serve one of three purposes: a negotiation signal, a framing test, or a prelude to a formal proposal cycle. But regardless of intent, the effect is the same. The conversation has already moved. And once Social Security enters open negotiation space in American politics, it never fully leaves it again. For now, the administration has gone quiet following the backlash. And in Washington, silence after a political shock is never neutral. It is recalibration. Because every strategist in the Capitol understands one thing tonight: this is not just about messaging. It is about whether Social Security remains untouchable or becomes negotiable in the years ahead. And that question has now been placed directly into the public arena, not in theory, but in real time. Millions of Americans are now watching a debate they were never supposed to see this openly, and Washington knows something it has always known at moments like this. Once the public is paying attention this closely, there is no easy exit. This story is not ending tonight. It is beginning.